Next item on our agenda, important item on our learning environment survey.
That we suddenly have about our schools that we didn't have before, because that many people in the city took responses were counted. So whatever the response rate at any school, every single parent, teacher, or student who said something had their voice counted every day from inside or just outside all of our schools. When you do a sample survey, you try to get better. You do a sample so that you can get higher response rates. Teachers communicate with each other and to parents. Engagement, again, however, by school, which of these things do you think is the number one aspect of the school that you would like to see change? Notice that in the middle there, about midway, the 10% number, more preparation for state tests. 10% of parents said that was the key thing that needed to happen at their schools. You can compare that to the 1% of parents who thought that the most important thing to change was less test preparation. So that's very interesting information. I think we hear a lot of complaints about too much test preparation. Those tend to come from more or less middle-class schools. It turns out that citywide, although you don't hear about it so much, 10 to 1 parents would prefer
Jim,
more.
if I might interrupt, just a point of technique here. I think if you're going to ask a question about an emotional and controversial issue, I think it's standard survey practice to pull that off into an isolated question and ask, is there too much, too little, agree, disagree about the specific topic of testing. This is kind of like a catch-all of a lot of different issues, so I don't think it's appropriate to compare the 10% versus 1%. If you asked all of the people who responded about testing specifically, you may not have seen that ratio.
Well, I don't agree with you that it's not appropriate. You might want to design a survey differently, and there are lots of ways you could design it, but we did have the help of experts from a number of the city universities in the city, as well as people who have done these surveys elsewhere, for example, Chicago, and they were very comfortable with this question. It reveals what it says. If you ask parents what the first most important thing is, this is what they said. You could ask it in a lot of different ways. And
yes, but it doesn't allow you to compare the two individual responses head-to-head in the way that you're doing. Because you're suggesting that 10 to 1 parents favor more testing over less testing. And if you ask parents, that would not be the outcome that you would see.
No, I didn't suggest that. I suggested, and it's not a suggestion, these are what parents said. I can't help it. We put it out there. This is what they said. But they said, when you ask them what's the most important thing, for those parents who chose to say that something about test preparation was the most important issue for them, 10 times as many asked for more test preparation, or voted, in a sense, for more test preparation than voted for less, among those who chose that as the single most important thing that they chose to answer about for that school. So if we go on, this is another way to look at it. On the left there are parents who picked out some kind of programmatic improvement that they preferred to have, and then we compare it to these other categories. And really, by and large, the largest chunk of parents say that the most important thing they would like to see at their school is some kind of programmatic enhancement. We'd like more hands-on learning, maybe more laboratories, more or better enrichment programs, challenging courses, arts programs, and the like. So that seems to me to be the place where we're getting parent wishes for improvement more than any of the other categories.
Jim, can I jump in again and ask a question? There was a lot of press coverage of this particular chart, with the consensus being that this was an attempt on the mayor's part to try to discredit the desire of parents to have smaller classes by lumping in a bunch of other stuff and saying, well, that's really first. That's what he was doing. I think he came out the worst in that argument. What's your sense? Is this politically motivated here to kind of deny parents the first thing they want to do?
I can't help being a lawyer. I think you are too. That would call for speculation, and I simply am not going to engage in that. But, you know, again, all I can say is the chart speaks for itself. Every single number that the parents gave us is represented there, and every single one of the numbers is there. You can count it the way, however you want, that's fine, but all this does is say 24% of the parents answered this way, 10% this way, 19% that way. And so I can't see anything about that that is a representation of anything other than the data that is there. And if you go back, Kathleen, to the previous one, the mayor presented this slide and then presented the next one. So everything was presented. This deck, this set of slides was given to the press. They had it, and you know they reported it the way they wanted to. I didn't actually see a consensus among them one way or the other about what the mayor was doing. They simply reported what the mayor said, and they reported what some other people said in response. And I don't know how you get a consensus one way or the other. It was just different views about what the survey tended to show.
Jim, we've been in Manhattan spending a lot of time looking at the school level survey results and finding some interesting things. We have a parent who downloaded one at a time each of the school's results, and we're seeing that there's a lot of very useful information in here, as you might expect. We see some schools, and it happens to coincide in areas of where residential development is outstripping school capacity, where parents rate class size above 70% of them will say that's the #1 issue for them. On the other hand, we have schools where class size isn't the first priority, where it's enrichment programs is the first priority. So a request to you, would you make available to the CECs and the district presidents' councils and the borough presidents maybe a list of the schools in their area and what the results are, so that they can do this type of analysis a little bit more easily and see what schools are, what the priorities are at different schools?
Well, as I pointed out, I don't know, is it next week or the following week, but in any event, we're going to have on a website all of that data. And you can click on it by the DBN, which of course includes the district, and it'll all arrange itself and hear all the district schools. And so it'll just be, you can slice it and dice it however you want.
We'll see all the answers to the questions?
All questions.
All questions, all populations, everything.
And then my second request is for next year, and maybe just to lessen the controversy, can we consider a question about some of the controversial issues like class size, like how is the school leadership team functioning? Can we do those in isolation just to get a read on that particular issue?
Well, we're considering all recommendations for changes, and we will go through a process to identify where we feel like we can learn more, where the constituencies feel like they didn't have an opportunity to reflect things that are important to them.